We are counting down 30 cheap British meals our grandparents ate to survive. These are the dishes that stretched pennies into portions, turned scraps into suppers, and kept families fed through rationing, strikes and winters that seemed endless. From forgotten broths simmered on coal ranges to puddings that made poverty taste almost sweet, each entry reveals the ingenuity of a generation that refused to let hardship win. Expect calorie-laden classics, surprising ingredients, and flavors forged in times when nothing could be wasted, and every shilling had to do the work of two. Some will shock you with their starkness. Others might stir a memory you did not know you had. A scent from a grandparent's kitchen, or a taste you have not encountered in decades. Which survival meal claims the top spot? Let's begin our countdown with number 30. Number 30. Nettle soup emerged from hedgerows and bomb sites alike. A free meal gathered by mothers who knew that desperation could be disguised with a little onion and salt. In the spring of 1947, when bread was still rationed and greengrocers' shelves sat half empty, foraging became survival. Ministry of Food leaflets encouraged families to seek out wild greens, and nettles, abundant and ignored, answered the call. Housewives donned thick gloves, filling baskets with young leaves before the sting could set in, often walking miles along canal paths and railway embankments where the plants grew thick and untouched. Boiled with a potato or two and a splash of stock made from Sunday's bones, the soup turned a vivid green, earthy, and surprisingly mild. Children approached it with suspicion, noses wrinkled at the color, but empty stomachs won every argument. Oral histories recall mothers insisting it tasted like spinach, though few were convinced. For many, nettle soup was the taste of making do when there was nothing else to make do with, a reminder that the land itself could provide when wages and rations failed. Number 29. Faggots and peas packed offal into parcels of thrift, turning pig's liver, heart, and lungs into something almost celebratory. Butchers in the Black Country sold them for pennies, wrapped in caul fat and seasoned with sage and onion. By 1954, faggots had become a staple of Midland's working-class tables, their rich, iron-heavy taste familiar to anyone who grew up near a factory or a forge. Mothers boiled dried marrow-fat peas until they turned to mush, spooning the grey-green slurry alongside 2 or 3 faggots, swimming in thick onion gravy. The smell was distinctive, meaty and herbal, drifting from terraced kitchens into cobbled streets. For families where fresh meat was a Sunday luxury, faggots offered protein at a price that didn't break the housekeeping tin. Number 28. Chip butties answered hunger with the simplest arithmetic. Bread plus chips plus butter equaled full bellies for almost nothing. In the 1950s, a bag of chips cost 3p from the local chippy, and a loaf of bread sat at 11p. Housewives sent children running to the fryer with coins clutched in sweaty palms, and minutes later, steaming chips were pressed between slices of white bread, the butter melting into golden pools. No meat, no vegetables, just carbohydrates piled on carbohydrates, and the sharp bite of salt and vinegar soaking through the crust. For many northern families, the chip butty was not a treat. It was Tuesday's tea when wages ran short, and Friday's pay packet felt a lifetime away. Number 27. Oxtail soup simmered for hours on the back of coal ranges, transforming the cheapest cut at the butcher's into something dark, rich, and deeply satisfying. A whole oxtail cost under a shilling in the early 1950s, dismissed by those who could afford better, but embraced by mothers who knew that collagen and marrow made broths that stuck to the ribs. The kitchen filled with a beefy perfume as cartilage broke down and vegetables softened into the stock. Children were warned not to waste the meat clinging to the bones, sucking every shred before surrendering the tail to the dog. Oxtail soup was patience turned into a meal, proof that time and heat could make even the poorest ingredients taste like prosperity. Number 26. Liver and onions stretched the meat ration further than almost any other dish, delivering iron and protein at a fraction of the cost of steak or chops. Lamb's liver, at just 1 shilling a pound in 1952, fried quickly in a hot pan with heaps of soft, caramelized onions and a splash of gravy. The smell divided households. Some children gagged at the metallic tang. Others grew to crave the crisp edges and creamy centers. Ministry of Food campaigns promoted offal as patriotic eating, and mothers obeyed, serving liver once a week whether the family liked it or not. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept blood strong and bellies quiet through the long years of rationing. Number 25. Potted meat was spread thinly across slices of bread, a way to make a few scraps of beef or pork last an entire week. Housewives minced leftover roast with butter and spices, pressing the mixture into ramekins and sealing it with a layer of clarified fat. The result was dense, salty, and intensely savory, a concentrated reminder of Sunday's joint long after the gravy had been scraped from the pan. In an era before refrigeration was common, the fat seal kept the meat safe for days, tucked at the back of the larder. Children spread it on toast for tea, never quite sure what animal it had come from, only that it tasted of thrift and determination, and that they must not waste a single ounce. Number 24. Scotch broth warmed the kitchens of Scotland and the industrial north, a soup so thick it could almost be called a stew. Pearl barley, split peas and root vegetables joined forces with a scrap of mutton or a lamb neck, simmering until the broth turned cloudy and the barley swelled to bursting. A single pot could feed a family for 2 days, reheated and stretched with water as needed. The National Food Survey of 1955 recorded that barley consumption peaked during winter months, a quiet testament to the soup's role in survival. For generations raised on Scotch broth, the taste of barley and lamb fat remains inseparable from the memory of cold mornings and warm kitchens. Number 23. Toast and drippings' leaner cousin, bread and margarine, fed millions when even animal fat was hard to come by. Margarine, promoted heavily during rationing as a butter substitute, cost less and spread further. Children came home from school to find slices of bread waiting, smeared with the pale, slightly oily spread, and sometimes dusted with sugar for a hint of sweetness. It wasn't beloved, but it was reliable. Diaries from the era record the monotony. Bread and marge again. Mother says be grateful. For families where every penny mattered, gratitude was less about taste and more about the fact that there was anything on the plate at all. Number 22. Cheese and onion pie stretched a few ounces of cheddar into a meal for 5 or 6, with onions doing the heavy lifting. Housewives layered sliced onions and grated cheese between sheets of short-crust pastry, baking until the top turned golden and the filling bubbled at the edges. In 1953, cheese was still rationed to just 2 ounces per person per week, making every sliver precious. The pie emerged from the oven smelling sharp and savory, sliced into wedges and served with pickles or a spoonful of brown sauce. Vegetarian by necessity rather than choice, it proved that comfort did not always require meat, just a little imagination and a lot of onion. Number 21. Peas pudding clung to the ribs of workers in the northeast, a dish so old its roots stretched back to medieval Britain. Dried yellow split peas were soaked, boiled, and mashed with butter and seasoning until smooth, then served alongside ham or bacon when available, or simply with bread when it was not. By the 1950s, peas pudding had become synonymous with Newcastle and the surrounding coal fields, sold in blocks from market stalls and spread thick on stotties. The taste was earthy, mild, and filling, a reminder that pulses had fed the poor long before rationing made them fashionable again. Number 20. Kedgeree recycled yesterday's fish into this morning's breakfast, a habit inherited from the British Raj and adapted to post-war thrift. Smoked haddock, flaked and mixed with rice, hard-boiled eggs, and a pinch of curry powder offered a filling start to the day, without requiring fresh ingredients. In coastal towns, where fish was cheap and plentiful, kedgeree appeared on tables several times a week. Mothers stretched a single fillet across portions for 4 or 5, the rice doing most of the work. The smell of smoked fish and warm spice drifted through cold kitchens, promising energy for the day ahead. Sausage and mash stood as the weeknight savior of working-class Britain, a meal so simple it required almost no skill, only a willingness to queue at the butcher's. Sausages, rationed to just 1.5 per person per week in 1952, were stretched with mounds of mashed potato and drowned in onion gravy. The sausages themselves were often more bread than meat, a fact children noticed but parents ignored. What mattered was the ritual, the sizzle in the pan, the steam rising from the mash, the gravy boat passed from hand to hand. Sausage and mash was proof that even the most ordinary ingredients could become something worth gathering around. Number 18. Bread pudding turned stale loaves into a dense, spiced slab that could fuel a family through a long afternoon. Unlike its cousin, bread and butter pudding, this version was heavier, darker, and less refined. Housewives soaked old bread in tea or milk, then mixed it with suet, dried fruit, sugar, and a generous shake of mixed spice before baking until firm. The result was almost like a cake, sold by the slice in bakeries or made at home when the bread bin held nothing but crusts. Children ate it cold from the larder, while fathers wrapped a chunk in paper to take to work. Bread pudding was waste transformed into energy, thrift baked into every bite. Number 17. Mince and tatties anchored the Scottish table, a dish so fundamental it barely needed a recipe. Minced beef, often the cheapest grade available, was browned with onions and simmered in stock until thick, then served beside a heap of floury mashed potatoes. The mince stretched further than any roast, feeding families of 6 or 7 from a single pound of meat. Mothers added carrots or turnips when the budget allowed, but the core remained unchanged. Protein, starch, and gravy, all for a few shillings. For generations of Scots, mince and tatties was not just dinner, it was identity, a meal that said home more clearly than any other. Number 16. Rarebit elevated cheese on toast into something richer, a pub classic adapted for the family kitchen. Grated cheese was melted with ale, mustard, and a splash of Worcestershire sauce, then poured over thick slices of toast and grilled until bubbling and browned. In the 1950s, when cheese rations finally lifted, rarebit became a celebration of abundance, however modest. The sharp, tangy sauce clung to the bread, each bite a small defiance against years of scarcity. Children watched the cheese bubble under the grill, waiting for the moment it turned golden, while parents savored a dish that asked for little, but delivered much. Number 15. Stovies brought the leftovers of Sunday's roast back to life in Scottish kitchens, a one-pot dish built on potatoes, onions, and whatever meat remained. The name came from the French word étouffé, which means stewed, but the dish itself was pure working-class pragmatism. Mothers layered sliced potatoes with scraps of beef or lamb, added a splash of stock or gravy, and let the pot simmer until everything melded into a soft, savory mass. There were no rules, only the principle that nothing should be wasted. Stovies appeared on Monday tables across Scotland, a second act for ingredients that had already taken their bow. Number 14. Fried bread soaked up the last of the bacon fat, a breakfast side that turned stale slices into something crisp and indulgent. In the full English, fried bread held its own against eggs and sausages, its surface golden and glistening, its interior soft and rich. Mothers saved bacon drippings in a tin by the stove, spooning out just enough to coat the pan before adding the bread. The smell was unmistakable: salt, smoke, and the promise of a filling start. For many, fried bread was the best part of a fry-up, the piece fought over when the last rasher had been claimed. Number 13. Corned beef fritters stretched a single tin into a meal for the whole family. The meat was mixed with mashed potato, coated in batter, and fried until crisp. Ministry of Food recipes encouraged creativity with tinned meat, and fritters answered the call. Children loved the crunch, the way the batter shattered to reveal the soft, salty filling inside. Served with chips or bread and butter, fritters made corned beef feel almost festive. In an era when fresh meat was scarce and fridges rare, the humble fritter proved that even the most processed ingredient could become something worth seconds. Number 12. Colcannon crossed the Irish Sea to feed British families, a dish of mashed potatoes folded with cabbage or kale and enriched with butter and milk. Simple, cheap, and impossibly comforting, it appeared on tables when meat was out of reach and vegetables were all the larder held. The green streaks through white potato gave it color, the butter gave it soul. Mothers served it in great mounds, sometimes with a well of melted butter pooled in the center, each spoonful a reminder that poverty did not have to mean blandness. Number 11. Brawn, or head cheese, made use of the parts most would rather forget. The head and trotters of a pig were boiled until the meat fell away, and the cooking liquid set into a firm, jellied loaf. Butchers sold it sliced, cold, and ready to eat, a cheap source of protein that required no cooking at home. The taste was mild, the texture gelatinous, and the appearance enough to make children squirm. Yet brawn fed families when nothing else would. Its presence on the table was a quiet testament to the rule that governed post-war kitchens: waste nothing, eat everything. Number 10. Egg and chips required no recipe, only a frying pan and the knowledge that simplicity could satisfy. Eggs, finally off the ration in 1953, joined chips on plates across Britain, the yolk breaking over the golden heap, the edges crisping in the fat. It was dinner for those nights when the cupboard held little else, a meal that asked nothing of the cook, but delivered everything to the hungry. Children stabbed chips into runny yolk. Parents remembered the years when even this modest feast was out of reach. Egg and chips was freedom on a plate, proof that rationing's end had finally arrived. Number 9. Haslet, a Lincolnshire specialty, is minced pork offal mixed with herbs and breadcrumbs, pressed into a loaf and baked until firm. Sliced cold and served with pickles or on sandwiches, it stretched the cheapest parts of the pig into meals for days. The taste was savory and herbal, the texture dense and satisfying. In the East Midlands, haslet remained a market stall staple well into the 1970s, a reminder that regional thrift had its own vocabulary, its own traditions, its own pride. Number 8. Jam sandwiches fed children when school budgets and home larders ran equally bare. 2 slices of bread, a smear of strawberry or plum jam, and nothing more. It was lunch, tea, and sometimes supper, depending on how far the week's wages had to stretch. The sweetness masked the monotony, and the bread filled bellies that might otherwise have gone empty. Diaries from the era record the routine without complaint. Jam pieces again. Better than nout. For many, the taste of cheap jam on white bread remains the flavor of childhood itself. Number 7. Spam fritters joined their corned beef cousins in the pantheon of battered thrift, the pink processed meat sliced, dipped, and fried until golden. Spam arrived from America during the war and never quite left, its salty, slightly sweet flavor dividing generations. Children loved the crunch. Parents tolerated the taste. Everyone agreed it was better than going hungry. Served with chips and mushy peas, spam fritters became a fish shop alternative, a Friday treat when cod was too dear. Number 6. Porridge started every winter morning in homes where central heating was a distant dream and coal fires barely touched the chill. Oats, bought in bulk for pennies a pound, simmered with water and a pinch of salt until thick and creamy, the wooden spurtle scraping the pot to prevent sticking. Children ate it with a spoon of golden syrup or a splash of milk if the dairy had delivered. Fathers swallowed it plain, standing by the stove before the first shift, knowing that nothing else would keep the cold at bay until dinner. In Scotland, the tradition ran deepest, with some families keeping a porridge drawer where the mixture was poured, cooled, and sliced for later meals. Porridge was fuel, not pleasure, but it kept hunger quiet and bodies warm through mornings that seemed to last forever. The National Food Survey of 1951 recorded oat consumption at over 2 pounds per person per week, a figure that speaks to the dish's role as Britain's original survival food. Number 5. Scouse gave Liverpool its very identity, a stew so tied to the city that its people took its name. Mutton or beef, potatoes, onions, and carrots simmered together for hours until the meat dissolved and the broth thickened into something approaching gravy. In the poorest households, meat vanished entirely, leaving only blind scouse, a vegetable stew that fed families when wages failed, and the butcher's credit ran dry. The dish arrived with Irish and Scandinavian sailors who docked at Liverpool's busy port, but it was adopted and transformed by the working-class communities who made the city their home. The smell of scouse drifting from kitchen windows was the smell of survival, a dish born in dockside poverty and embraced as a badge of pride. Mothers made it stretch for days, adding water and potatoes as the pot dwindled, until what remained was more broth than stew. Yet no one complained. Scouse was Liverpool on a plate, and to eat it was to belong. Number 4. Dripping toast served hot from the grill brought the memory of Sunday's roast to every weekday breakfast. The rendered fat, saved in a basin by the stove, spread easily over warm bread, melting into the crumb and leaving a sheen of savory richness. Mothers added a shake of salt, and children ate in silence, too hungry for complaint. Dripping toast was the taste of nothing wasted, every last drop of goodness wrung from the weekly joint. Number 3. Meat paste sandwiches filled lunchboxes and tea tables, the thin pink or brown spread offering a hint of protein when real meat was beyond reach. Shipham's and other brands sold paste in small glass jars, their contents a mystery of processed fish or meat. The taste was salty and faintly metallic, the texture smooth enough to spread thin. It wasn't loved, but it was eaten, and for families counting every penny, that was enough. Number 2. Bread and milk appeared in sick rooms and nurseries, but also on tables where nothing else remained. Stale bread, torn into a bowl, covered with warm milk and sweetened with a spoonful of sugar, became supper when all other options failed. It was the meal of last resort, served without comment or complaint, eaten in kitchens lit by single bulbs where the silence spoke louder than words. Children ate it without question, spoons scraping enamel bowls clean, while parents watched in silence, hoping tomorrow would bring something more substantial. In the hardest times, During strikes or when illness kept the breadwinner from work, bread and milk might appear night after night, its blandness broken only by the sweetness of sugar, saved for such emergencies. Diaries from mining communities record the dish with quiet resignation. Bread and milk again. The little ones don't mind. They don't know any different. Bread and milk was surrender dressed as comfort, the last meal before the cupboard stood truly empty. Yet for many it carried no shame, only the taste of getting through another day. And finally, in first place, number 1. The Sunday roast, stretched across an entire week, crowned the survival meals of post-war Britain. A single joint of beef, lamb, or pork, roasted on Sunday and served with all the trimmings, became Monday's cold cuts, Tuesday's shepherd's pie, Wednesday's broth, and Thursday's sandwiches, before the bones were boiled for Friday's soup. Nothing was wasted. Not the dripping, saved for toast and frying. Not the gravy, reheated and poured over leftovers to disguise their age. Not even the gristle, chopped fine and hidden in hash. Housewives planned the week around that one precious joint, knowing that its purchase represented half the food budget or more. The butcher's wrapped parcel carried the weight of 7 days of meals, and the care taken in its preparation reflected that burden. Roasting times were calculated to the minute. Carving was performed with surgical precision, each slice measured to ensure there would be enough for the days ahead. The Sunday roast was not a single meal, but a system, a philosophy of thrift that turned one afternoon's feast into 7 days of sustenance. Children learned young that the best cuts went to father, the worker whose wages kept the house fed. Mothers often ate last, taking whatever remained after every other plate was filled. For families who survived rationing, strikes, and hard winters, the roast was more than food. It was hope, portioned carefully, and made to last. The steam rising from that Sunday joint carried with it the promise that however lean the week might be, no one would go to bed hungry. Across all 30 entries, from the free nettles gathered in spring to the Sunday roast stretched across 7 days, these meals tell the story of a generation that refused to go hungry. Some dishes shock with their starkness. Others surprise with their warmth. But all share the same truth. Survival demanded creativity, and creativity produced traditions that shaped British kitchens for decades. The common thread is thrift. Nothing wasted, everything used, and meals made from almost nothing at all. These 30 cheap British meals are more than recipes. They are the taste of endurance, passed down through generations, and remembered long after the last plate was cleared.